My friends, hello. Welcome to what I think is the final unboxing for my channel in 2018, because I don't think I have any more decks on the way, although they keep surprising me and showing up. So, also, full disclosure, you may hear me sniffle a lot in this video. It's not because I'm sick again, it's because I just ate the spiciest chicken tikka masala I've ever had, and it was so good that I couldn't stop eating it. But my sinuses are clearer than they've been in 40 years. This is the Next World Tarot, which is not new, but it is out in a new printing. I missed the first printing. People told me time and again, hey, Ben, you got to check out the Next World Tarot. And I'd say, yeah, I do. That sounds like it's right up my alley. And I wouldn't. And then by the time I got around to it, it was sold out. So when someone recently said, hey, the Next World Tarot is coming as print, I said, yeah, I got to check that out. So I actually did the pre-order for the new printing. I believe that those are going out this week. And then I think there's opportunity to order from the artist for shipping next year, if I'm not mistaken. So here we go. Let's take a look at the Next World Tarot, which I have not actually seen an unboxing of. I have seen a handful of cards from in various Instagram posts or in the Facebook communities and groups, and in just various people telling me, hey, look at this card. So let's zoom on in. This is the box. It's a large deck. It's about the same size as the largest deck I think I have in my collection. A little bit thinner than this Oculati deck, which I'm a big fan of. And the artist is Cristy C. Road. And the box is a really nice matte finish. And we will get in there and slide out the deck. Now, it's much thinner than the Oculati, I can never get it right, deck. So probably much easier to shuffle. This is up my alley in many ways because it represents multiculturalism, diversity, gender, LGBTQ, all of the things that make us a diverse and interesting world. And so this is why it has been recommended to me many times. I'm very happy to see it here in front of me on my table. And it comes with a guidebook, a small but lovely, again, nice cardstock guidebook. And what does she say here? There's a lot, actually. So there's a little intro. There is instructions. There is the majors and the minors. And that's about it. Oh, the Fool is stuck in the box here. It's interesting cardstock, actually. It is really thin. It's super thin. But again, for a deck this large, that makes it easy to shuffle. All right. So it's an interesting thing because I get a lot, I talk a lot about diversity in decks and having decks that represent the human experience as we see it today. And at the same time, I tend to use a lot of old decks because they have kind of a timelessness that I appreciate. So it's funny because I have not... There's a lot of decks that are pretty diverse, but that I haven't really brought into my reading practice quite yet, regularly, anyway. So it's interesting. But also what's interesting too is that many of them are Rider-Waite-Smith, and I'm not reading a lot of Rider-Waite-Smith systems right now. So, but with that set aside, I'm coming around on decks with modern art in them. And by modern art, I don't mean like modern art. I mean modern life art, if that makes any sense. So let's walk through. So here's the Fool. We have astrological associations. We've got the number. We've got the planetary association. And we've got Let's read the description anyway, or see if she incorporates the Fool. Excuse me. The Fool isn't necessarily new to adulthood or responsibility. The Fool is new to their recognition of the spirit. As they rewrite their destiny, they question whether their truth actually lies in a world outside of everything they have ever known. The Fool is once crusty punk rocker who left their nest lined with cigarette butts, drink tickets, ex-girlfriend's love letters, mixtape inserts with missing tapes, orange peels for a good aroma, and chips of black tourmaline for good fortune. They sought after stability, and in the process lost their soul. The Fool saw this quirk in their destiny and gave their 2 weeks. The Fool is enthralled as they journey into nowhere with pockets full of charms and a backpack full of pens and multivitamins. They ask you to take this time to recall that challenge, that journey, or that creative outlet that hides in the warmest, quietest corner of the right side of your brain. What does it represent? Is it amped to save you and those around you? Is it fabulously affirming and righteously healing? Does this path set your truest self on fire and leave you glowing with ambition? Deconstruct what this journey means. Take on the burdens and delights. Understand that the cost of starting new is growing up, but the cost of growing up is not your wayward magic. So there we go. So it looks like I'm trying to see what the card. So the sign here says Yonkers, but nowhere is over it. So that's the Fool. Here's the Magician. I'm going to be really tempted to read the description of all of these, but I'll hold off on that temptation. So the Magician, under what looks like the Brooklyn Bridge, actually. And she has books on herbal medicine, feminist theory, emergency first response. And I can't read that last one. It looks like she has an iPad here. I love this kinds of combination of spiritual and earthiness and technology all together here out in the wild. This beautiful high priestess out on the beach with some crystals and some candles and some pomegranates. Whoops. The Empress. Really interesting that she's sort of sitting on the rocks, because I so associate the Empress with earthiness. But this obviously has a very Empressy quality for sure. Now, the Emperor has become the teacher, and I don't necessarily like that, to be totally honest, because I think while I can understand wanting to revise out patriarchal tendencies in a deck, I also like the balance of the Emperor and the Empress are not the same. They have archetypal things that I like, and I don't necessarily associate the Emperor with a teacher. And I can see that the Hierophant is the messenger. And in both cases, those are associations that I wouldn't normally make. And I feel like the majors have a purpose that they serve in those archetypal roles. That said, as I always say, if a deck, or as I frequently say, if a deck does what all the other decks have done, why do a new deck, right? So, what does the teacher say in the guidebook? The teacher organizes the platform for the debate, the arsenal for the life lessons, the guides for poetic imagination, the textbooks for growing up, and the never-ending stories. Having learned from experience, failed from obstacles, and regrouped through experimenting with right and wrong, the teacher gathers her research and separates into control and variable positions. She wants us to be able to choose between self-reflection and action, righteous control, or an abuse of power. The teacher asks you to hone your wisest self and turn chaos into a map, and it goes on a little bit. See, this for me actually has more of a flavor of the Hierophant in a modern way, but again, it's quite nice. And she's reading this bridge called My Back. And I can't quite read the rest of the text. Here's the Messenger. So this would normally be the Hierophant. The Lovers. Now, a lot of modern decks, which are really nice, tend to have a lot of muscular, physically attractive, stereotypically physically attractive people in it. And this deck opens up the door to different body types, to different types of humanity that are not traditionally attractive. And here we have a human with a cane who is not a traditionally muscular body type with the pink triangle. So we have a sort of collection of things that are not culturally norms on the Lover's card, sort of learning to embrace those parts of ourselves that the society at large would rather us not embrace, or that try to subjugate. Now this broad is sassy AF. This is the Chariot, with walking a blue elephant and a pink elephant in a space Candyland hybrid. Painted for the gods. Love her. Strength. Now, I think it's important to know, and one thing I did know, is that this deck is really a reinvention of all the archetypes. And so when we're looking at strength, for example, we're looking at strength from a different mirror. Same thing with the Hermit. And interestingly, this Hermit on its surface has more of a negative connotation in its appearance than I would necessarily say the Hermit has for me on a traditional basis. So there's a loneliness to this card in isolation that, again, it's not the Hermit that I know, and it's not the way I read that Hermit. There's almost sort of like an absence of connection. I wonder what. Let's see what the guidebook says. The Hermit isn't suffering from pain, she is transforming it into magic. The Hermit built herself a sanctuary free from excess, but brimming with survival tools. Music for dancing, a candle for channeling, a plant for oxygen, and a window for light. The Hermit isn't about studying objects, achievements, and communities, but about transforming the mind into the only tool you need to heal. The Hermit is a silent meditation, a silent performance, or the artful yelling that heals the soul even when no one can hear you scream. Her art is singing along. She knows every word to every song that taught her how to fight. She asks you to do the same, to perform, breathe, and today live for no one but your own reflection. She asks you to take what you gather and let it fortify you. She asks you to believe that someone somewhere misses you and they will be ready when you are. So though the little book here is not that large, I think, you know, it's important to get a sense of what the artist's interpretation is by reading it. Here's the Wheel of Fortune. Justice. This is the cover of the box. Suspension would be the Hanged Man. Here's Death. Temperance. The Devil. Revolution instead of the Tower. The Star. The Moon. The Sun. Judgment. And the World. And then we get into the minors. So here we start with the Ace of Wands, the Two of Wands. So this deck has the esoteric titles, or they seem so far to be a little more, well, I've only looked at two, but a little more Crowley-esque. So here's the Two of Wands, Dominion, Mars and Aries. Three of Wands, Foresight. I don't think that is, let me see if I have, excuse me, I've got Crowley's deck, but I don't know if I shuffled it, which means I did not, so I can look. Three of Wands, no, the Three of Wands and Crowley would be Virtue, so this is not necessarily Crowley's keywords for the cards. Four of Wands is harmony. Five of Wands is strife. Six of Wands is victory. Seven of Wands is courage. Eight is direct action. Nine of Wands is resilience. 10 is completion. We have the Page of Wands. Some punk rock action on what looks like the Golden Gate Bridge. The Knight of Wands. The Fire Starter. What's the Page of Wands? The Home of Fire. The Queen of Wands is the Throne of Determination. The King of Wands is the Throne of Fire. Here we get into Pentacles. This is the roots of the earth. That's the ace. The roots are Golden Dawn for the aces. The Two of Pentacles is intersection. The Three is the team. The Four of Pentacles is arsenal. Five of Pentacles is turmoil. Six is redistribution. Seven of Pentacles is vision. Eight is creation. Nine is self-sufficiency. And 10 is security. Excuse me. And then we get into the courts for Pentacles. We have the Page of Pentacles, the home of ideas. The Knight of Pentacles, the methodical approach. The Queen of Pentacles, the throne of sanctuary. And the King of Pentacles, the throne of security. On to swords. Ace of Swords is the roots of action. Two of Swords is protection. Three of Swords is sorrow. Four of Swords is respite. So this is very traditional Golden Dawn so far in this suit. Five of Swords is survival. Six is passage. Seven is escape. Eight is restriction. 9 is despair. And 10 is ruin. Not my favorite suit of swords because I do not like the Golden Dawn associations of the suit of swords. So that's always problematic for me because I don't read that way. The Page of Swords is the home of action. The Knight of Swords is the escape plan. The Queen of Swords is the throne of truth. The King of Swords is the throne of knowledge. It's interesting. The Ace of Cups is the root of water. And then we get into the Two of Cups, which is connection. I feel like I know these guys. The Three of Cups is joy. The Four of Cups is reevaluate. The Five of Cups is loss. The Six of Cups is reunion. 7 is imagination. 8 is abandon. 9 is happiness. 10 is safety. And then we get into the courts. The Page of Cups, the home of expression. The Knight of Cups is the love song. The Queen of Cups is the throne of emotion. And the King of Cups is the throne of movement. So there's our walkthrough. I really like the art. I am not loving that there's keywords on the cards, which I didn't know when I got this. We all know how I feel about that. They are small, which I do appreciate. And actually, if you really wanted to trim them off, you could. Let me zoom out. I always forget to zoom out when I'm doing my shuffle. So it corner shuffles actually really easily because the cardstock is really super thin. So that's a nice thing for a deck this large to shuffle this easily is nice. It is thin enough that I think if you were to accidentally bend the card, you would absolutely crease it visibly. But again, you know, comparing it to the Oculati deck, which is both large and heavyweight, that's such a workout. This is really much more effortless to shuffle, which I do appreciate. And I don't necessarily dislike large tarot decks because I actually think that there's something very tarot-ish about exceptionally large decks. So let's lay out some cards. I don't know if I'll be able to get my normal 9 cards, but we will try. Yeah, there's just something really satisfying about turning over like really large tarot cards. It feels like an event in a way. Let's push those up. Cover the bottom row just to get, oh no, I guess I don't have to. So here is a spread of 9. It looks really nice. It looks very modern and colorful. I don't know how I feel about the deck, to be totally honest with you. And it is sort of a lot of the things I yearn for in a tarot deck, which is that it is diverse, it is fresh, it does show ages and genders and body types and sexualities and races and cultures that I really like. There are a couple divergences in titles that I just wish weren't the case. Not Temperance, the Emperor and the Hierophant. Not a fan of like revising those out. One of the interesting things about revisionist decks, which I think that this is I don't think we can revise out the Emperor and the Hierophant from reality because those energies exist. Even if we have a negative association with the Emperor and the Hierophant, patriarchal leadership exists. And so the impact of it exists on us. And for that reason, I feel like even if I'm looking at this as a queer or feminist deck, the impact of the Emperor, the impact of the Hierophant or the Pope or those institutions that they represent impact us every damn day. In fact, the Emperor and the Hierophant are probably the 2 most powerful influences on people of color, queer people, women, non-white, you know, because we are dramatically impacted by the decisions and choices of the Emperors and the Hierophants in the world. And so to revise them out of the deck, to me, it doesn't acknowledge the reality of the impact those energies have on us. So I would have preferred that they stay in the deck. There is a card, you know, the Teacher, for example, which is what the Hierophant is renamed. To me, that's the Hermit. That's just always part of the Hermit. I'm sorry, that's the Messenger. The Teacher is the Emperor. That's the Hermit. The messengers are all the pages traditionally. So now again, this is this author's deck. This is Cristy C. Rhodes' deck. She can do whatever she wants. Just as a user, as a reader, that's what I'm saying, is that I actually do miss the energy of those cards because they have a huge impact on us every day. And then I just, you know, in terms of the titles on the cards, they are small enough. I don't really like having, you know, keywords or titles. That's not a secret. And you know, honestly, if you really wanted to trim this deck, you probably could trim the titles right off. I probably won't, but yeah, I mean, but beyond those 2 things, I do like it a lot. I love its diversity. You know, in a weird way, I'm sort of like, I wish I could make art. I wish I could draw and paint, because I want, every time I see a deck like this, like the Everyday Enchantment, like the Numinous, like any of the handful of decks that I've got over the years that I was super excited about because they were diverse, and reflective of the world as it exists, they're never quite what I was hoping for, and so I'm always a little disappointed by them. And so that's how I feel about this deck too, is that it's like, yeah, I was so excited, and it's just not quite what I wanted, and I'm waiting for the deck that I wish I could make, but I don't have the ability, and I've tried. I've been using Procreate on my iPad a lot to say, maybe I can force myself to be an artist, but it's just, I'm not. And the amount of energy and time it would go into creating that deck, I just don't have. So I like all of these decks. I just wish that I could have been part of the construction of them so that they could match more closely what I'm looking for in a modern deck that depicts the world as I see it. But this deck does do that. And so to that end, I think it really is successful. And actually, I have to say, looking at the cards individually, I was less impressed by seeing them all spread out in this way. Like, seeing them spread out here makes me like it even more. Yeah, so this is a look and my first impressions of the Next World Tarot, which I think is really successful, and I can see why people really, really adore it. And I think it's a big, important piece of the world of tarot. I'm so happy that this is out. I'm glad it's in my collection. I wish that there were a few things that were different. There are a couple small things in this deck that will likely prevent it from becoming a deck that I use regularly. And again, that's personal preference, right? And when I'm in need of decks like this, I will reach for them. But we'll see, we'll see how long it takes for me to see. I've done a lot of unboxings recently, which was never a thing I intended to do. I feel like I need to come back to them in a few months and sort of say, okay, here's what wound up happening with that deck. Did I liked it when I got it and I was going to use it all the time. Did I use it? Did I not? Etc. I wasn't going to use it at all, and I ended up using it all the time. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to come back and revisit these. I also am hoping to sort of take a step back from the consuming. I put up a bunch of unboxings this week. It just so happens that a bunch of things that I backed recently have come, and there was actually one deck I did a walkthrough of I didn't even post because I wasn't enjoying it. But yeah, so I've been doing a lot of unboxings because they've just all happened to sort of show up at the same time. But that's that. So I think this is the last new deck of 2018 for me. But I'll probably do like a year in review at some point soon. So yeah, anyway, that's a look at the Next World Tarot by Cristy Rhodes. Beautiful work of art, beautiful modern interpretation and reimagining, and I think that's a key, reimagining of tarot. This is not tarot as you know it. This is tarot. This really is tarot for another world. This is the Next World Tarot. So this is tarot for a new generation, and in that regard, that's probably why I'm feeling resistance to it, right? Because the deck itself is asking me to break free of my own preconceived notions about what tarot is, which is, I think, what it wants to do and what it should do. And so in that regard, I probably will spend some time with it to challenge myself. And also to surrender to decks like the Brady Tarot and others that I really liked, but that have keywords on them, which I resist actively. So that is that. I hope you're well, and I will see you soon. Be good.